Yes.
Okay. Dear Hayden.
Oh, you've written me a letter.
Quick little question. Do all my friends have to be Catholic? How can I make all my friendships with Catholics and non-Catholics then the best they can be?
Yeah. No, they don't all have to be Catholic. Some of them you can convert.
That's what I was looking for. That's it. Thanks.
Joking apart. Well, personalise it for a moment. Of my friends, I'd say about 70% of them are Catholic. But the first thing I do when I'm meeting someone for the first time and wondering, do I want to spend a bit more time with this person? Do I want it to be a second time? The key for me is, first of all, the person's mind. And that's not just because I got that philosophical training. It's because the mind, more than any other part of the whole package, the mind is the identity. The mind is who you are. If the mind is honest, if the mind is inquiring, if the mind is beautiful, if the words work between us, if you hear the words, if you give me the words back, if the conversation starts to happen, if I know there is truth here, then wherever there is truth, we know from Blessed Thomas Aquinas, there is the Holy Spirit behind all truth. Behind all people, each and every one of them redeemed by Christ, there is the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Blessed Trinity. I don't need to know the Catholic credentials before I have that second friendly visit with someone. I really don't. And I personally rejoice in the fact that my family is Scots Presbyterians and my friends include Presbyterians, Jews, a couple of really good Muslims and a majority of Catholics. However, it is the case that if you do have a religious faith, and some of you may not be Christian here, I fully understand that. If you have a religious faith, it's such a key part of your identity that it's probably going to be the case that not sharing that with someone it could be a bit of a difficulty. It means there'll be parts of your life this person isn't going to get, isn't going to share, spiritually obviously, but also various activities, they're not going to join in with you. That means maybe fewer of your best friends will be non-Catholics. But I reckon, as I said earlier, there's different sorts of friendship fulfilling different functions in our life. I hope to all of you, even if you're half my age, I'd be a sort of good older friend. But I think we all know that in about half an hour when I leave here, and you can do whatever you do, that's probably good. Because the purpose of this type of friendship between us is different from your friendships with your close mates or your best friends or your peers at university. So I don't think all your friends have to be Catholic. Maybe someone has a different view. Maybe someone has a different question.
Hayden, you spoke before about having an older friend. Could you perhaps comment why you think this is important to have an older friend, and also just a little bit about the importance, if any, of having a younger friend for those older adults in the room?
Yeah. Well, look, I think the question about having an older friend, these are sort of generalizations. I'm not saying these are rules, but I can see some advantages in having an older person in your life, and the advantages kick in especially in times of, for you, real stress or distress, when you really need somebody not just to be your mate, but somebody with a bit of wisdom, because they've been through already, hopefully successfully, some of the things you're going through. Now, for a lot of that, there's your big sister, there's your mum, there's your dad. But we know too that families are complex, and sometimes the causality of this is a bit mixed up, and the family might be the last person you talk to about certain problems. They may sometimes be the cause of problems. So having someone who's a bit of a third party and a bit older can be a real help. Just as in a natural family, you know how, I don't know if you have grandparents still alive, lots of you probably do, but there's something very special about grandparents, agreed? There's things you would take to Granny and Grandad that you maybe wouldn't take to Mum and Dad. It's partly because they've got the connection with you, but they're one step to the side. They don't have the astonishing closeness of mum and dad. So a bit of wisdom and experience. The question about having a friend and a mate who's younger than you, in all the years I've been talking in places like this, no one has ever asked me that. So a fresh answer for you, my friend. I think thinking from my own experience, having a good friend who's sort of friends who are younger than you brings you, as you're getting a bit older, part of the energy and vitality of youth. You saw me trying, I think about 7 times from memory, at having a go at those dismal gadgets that kids press buttons on. That's me having fun, but there's a real danger when you're moving through your years that you start to get technology phobic, and not just technology phobic, but phobic about the modern world. So what you should look out for in me now is signs that I've got this sort of phobia that everything is going downhill, the world is falling apart. It's not like it was when I was young. That's often an older person's response, and part of having a young, good friend is to stop you doing that. Which is why I want to come and give you a great big hug.
Just talking about emptiness. I think that's like a lot of people find it difficult to experience silence or moving away from that social media for more than a few hours is a big deal these days. What can you suggest about practical ways in which people can get used to that silence in their lives, used to that emptiness, because they feel that emptiness for a moment and they get scared. How can you give them practical ways in which they can slowly start to introduce it into their lives?
What a beautiful question. That was a great one. There's so many parts to that. So the first part is solitude. Actually being on your own, being alone without being lonely. Because we all know loneliness is a bad thing and it makes you feel uncomfortable, and that way is not good. But being alone, I think, is very important. Quite a bit of the time, we are going to find ourselves alone, but often we don't appreciate. You're not being left alone, are you? You got his camera just.
I'm trying to act natural.
I want that shot for my website. So getting back to solitude, this thing about getting used to, not for very long, but getting used to being on your own without feeling lonely. Loneliness is a sort of paranoia. It means I feel I should be doing something, I feel someone should be with me, or I feel there is someone with me just over there, but I can't quite see them. Avoiding that's the first part of the art. So the art is solitude. You focused on silence. It's almost impossible for us in our work. You got it? It is almost impossible to achieve it. I think in our lives in the middle of the city, we have to almost artificially manufacture this. I spoke to someone in the group last week about our church. It's just on the other side of the road on the campus there. Even when there's traffic thundering down Broadway around the church, there's an incredibly funny, interesting thing happens. When you're in church on your own and you go quiet, somehow the noise, the background sort of white noise falls away and you are left with just you and, if you believe, in him. And going into that sort of silence in a church, or if you're not Christian, your own religious equivalent, going into that silence is a gift of prayer. Personally, I get it from prayer. I don't know how I'd get it in other ways. Practical steps. When I came in the room and we were setting up the video earlier, I said to Pat, this is quite genuine, I've left my phone in the office, so if you need to tell me something about this, you can't get me. Even I, who hate the stuff, I feel a slight sense of anxiety. Because I'm worried if something happens at the university tonight, they're not going to get me till I get back to the house. We've got to let some of those anxieties go and treat the phone as a necessary communication tool or a safety device and not a substitute. I think if we could all leave the thing in a drawer, surely at the weekend the thing could go in a drawer at least for half a day. That said, we tried in the university, the staff, to have an email-free half a day, a week in semester time, and do you remember?
I do remember.
It fell apart after I think 2 weeks. So I am not underemphasizing how difficult this is. But life is about attaching and then detaching. As you mature, you attach and attach, friends, family, marriage, kids, and then you come down the hill and you start to detach. Every day looks the same. You get up, you go through, hi folks, you go to university, you go to work, attach, and then in a couple of hours we'll all start to detach. Let's value the detaching as much as the attaching.
I have a question. Cassie spoke about friends and which ones to let go of, and my question relates to that and sort of relationships in general, especially with like if you're seeing someone or you're thinking about getting serious, like seeing them long term. How do you know if they're leading you towards not a good life, but if they're helping you become the best person that you can be? Like, how do you know who to say goodbye to and who to keep? I know that's a hard question, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Is this in the particular case where it's a romantic one, or is it in the general friends case?
Sort of, yeah. Romantic a little bit, yeah. I guess if you had to pick one.
Yeah. Well, we could look at both of them. I think if you really have to, or you really find yourself seriously asking, should I let this one go? Then what you're already accepting is that you could let that one go, in which case you've basically already admitted this isn't a very deep one. So do you see what I mean? So letting if you really can let a friend go without being ripped apart by this, then there is a question about whether it is a real friend you're letting go. Because letting a true friend go, and I think, by the way, this category of best friend or true friend, I think it's fascinating. It's been around for hundreds of years, and nobody's done a real analysis of what a best friend is, but we all know, we all probably have one, I reckon, and we all know what it means. Anyway, so if it's a real friend, I think it's going to really, really hurt to let go, so possibly it isn't a real friend at all. When would you bring a friendship to an end? Well, as with any relationship, when it's dead. When is something dead? When it's no longer giving life. How do relationships give life? Well, there's about half a dozen fundamental parts to your personality. I mentioned them earlier: your mind, your imagination, your body, your sexuality, your sociability, your spirituality. Those are the parts of you that have to be brought alive by everyone who matters to you, every friend in your life. If those little parts of the garden aren't being watered and brought alive, then it's dead, and then it's actually ended. Now the interesting thing is some of your friendships will water some parts. This is a stupid metaphor. Why did I go with this one? Some of your friendships will serve some part of your personality, but not others. And that's probably okay, as long as they don't just serve one part. Now, if you've got a friend and the only thing you have in common is you're both Catholic, you go to church, it's just spirituality, that's probably not much of a friendship. If you've got a friend and the thing between you is just physical, you sort of go kickboxing together and you don't actually talk or share any other interests. Why is he laughing at me? Leave me alone. That's good. Well, we can all laugh at you. Good, I've got him embarrassed.
I don't go to the gym.
So I think the short answer is a friendship is bringing to life the many different parts of your personality. When it's romantic, when it's the boy who really matters to you, I just think that matters even more. If you're going to have to disguise your mind, make it seem as if you're more stupid than you really are, or more ignorant than you really are, or if you're going to have to disguise your faith, or if you're going to have to disguise your deep interest, your passion for, I don't know, theatre or romantic novels or ballroom dancing, if you're going to have to, disguise any key part of you to keep this going, I don't call that romance. There's a difference between sacrificing part of yourself for him, which I think is romantic, and hiding part of yourself so as to keep him. I don't think that's romantic. And I'm an old romantic.
Sorry, can I just, back on the topic of emptiness, I sort of found it interesting taking the perspective of emptiness as kind of almost a good space to go to, because I find that in a lot of my discussions, at least with friends, when they might be going through a bit of depression and stuff like that, they'll quickly say like, I'm just so empty and I can't help it, almost. And it's interesting, like, what is the difference there, I guess, of a good emptiness almost that is taking you to a place where you can grow as a person, but also an emptiness that you almost can't get rid of, and it's something that is a burden or guilt weighing down on someone.
Yeah, I think that second one, when it comes, is clearly the beginning of something very serious. So as we said at the end of last week, if that sort of the beginnings of pathological emptiness, beginnings of depression, real depression appears there, it's obviously critical to talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. Now that might start with the family or the older friend, and that might, if it's really serious, have to go to a professional, a counsellor, a psychologist, a chaplain, or whatever, fairly quickly. So I don't think there's anything positive about that at all. The emptiness metaphor, as I said to young Cassie over here earlier, I think fleeing emptiness is something I understand, because the emptiness metaphor is, it's the glass we all want to be filled. Mankind didn't make glasses so they sat there and shelved. We make glasses for one purpose, to be filled with water. And to really feel empty means that you feel there is something that should be in me, should be happening to me. There's a purpose I have, just like purpose of the glass, fill it with water. Purpose of me, fill me with love, fill me with truth, fill me with goodness, fill me with beautiful stuff, and it ain't happening. There's actually nothing good about that. That's different, I think, from this over here. This feeling of a really good feeling of solitude and silence, the ability to be on your own, to think just for a short time who I really am, to rediscover personal identity, to say to yourself, university or my mates or my family makes me act in this way, or makes me talk as if I value these things. Well, my name's Hayden Ramsey, and this is where I come from. What is it I really stand for and live for? What happened to me between about age roughly 14, 15, when we start becoming really rationally active? What happened to me between age 14 and 20, and then 30? Who was I, and so who am I? That can be disclosed in a good solitude, either a contemplative or a prayerful occasional solitude. But that feeling of emptiness, I think, is just pointing the way to isolation and a deep sense that I should be full and the stuff isn't coming. And of course, the good stuff to fill the beautiful glass of ourselves. The good stuff is all there. The glass can be filled. I'm very, very aware, particularly with the position in the university, that this, let's just stick with the emptiness word for now. It's out there. It's quite common. It's much more common than I realized 10 years ago. and it commonly is leading to depression. And there really are things, as you know, we can do about that. And someone else.
You were telling us to pursue our hobbies, which is fantastic, but we have to work, we have to study, things like that. And people, I think, there's this misconception that you're not working, you're not studying, you're not making use of yourself. I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about the role leisure plays in our life and how we can seek the perfection of ourselves, as you were talking about, we can't?
Yeah, I think real leisure, the deepest leisure, I keep pointing at you. What's your name? What's your name? What? Evie. I think real leisure goes back to what Evie said. It's actually the greatest leisure of all is being able to be for short periods on your own in a sort of contemplative framework. There's nothing more restful, more revealing than that. However, in our leisure lives, we tend to do either sporting things or cultural things or things connected with health and fitness. How important is it? It's absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. I think for a lot of people in the modern world, they get their leisure in their work. For a lot of people, the work I do is actually a sort of recreation. It's a joy to me. And I think that's a good thing, but it's a bad thing in that the lines have become blurred between work and leisure, and there starts to be a guilt about having time off. You notice when we go on holidays now, you'll all know holiday is just the old word holy day, because our holidays were originally the holy days of obligation, when we could have time off. That word's been replaced by words like leave, and you'll leave because I've left work. So even the notion of our leisure time off has been secularized, and there's that slight guilt that maybe I should be at work during this. I think part of the Christian genius was to say that one day a week would be a sacred day, and that would be the day when we would take our leisure. So the Sunday is both the sacred one and it's the leisure one. No other religion did that, by the way. No other religion put them together in quite that way. I think we've got to fight for that special day to stay completely a leisure day. I think it's good for us individually, and I think it's good for communities. Just one last thing. I think a good thing about the technology is people play with the technology, and I think it's important as you become an adult that you continue to play. We talk about playing sport, we don't do sport or perform sport, and I think it's really good that we keep that notion alive. And I think we should be playful with one another, even in a forum like this where we're talking about some serious stuff. I don't know if the priests and the bishops would agree, but I think the liturgy itself, at its greatest, the sacred liturgy is a playful thing. Because after all, when we go to church and the sacred liturgy of the Mass takes place, what we're trying to do on earth is to reproduce that extraordinary scene in heaven where the angels just tumble around and play with joy because they're in the presence of the Father. So I think we can afford to be playful every day.
Would you give your thoughts on a situation where like an individual would give up a more like stable kind of job to pursue their passion or their hobby as a career, instead of leaving it as their hobby, or if they feel complete when they do this hobby and they can somehow transform it into their career? What would you be your like thoughts and advice?
I think it's great. I mean, the first question you'd have to ask is, what are your obligations? So if you've got a family of kids to feed, you can't just go off and say, I'm going to collect rare species of cactuses. So the first question. Why don't I interrupt with you? The first question has to be, have I fulfilled my moral obligations? But then I think once that's taken care of, if you look at your working life, you're on this sort of trajectory. I'm just thinking of myself now, sort of going like that. And sometimes something comes crashing through it like that. A person or a special trip or a holiday you make or some old memory of how much you love doing this. And some people, as we know, throw it away and go off and do this. I think that's great. I think the idea of a career as such is overrated. It's easy for me to say because I suppose I've got one. But I think a lot of that is linked to the need to find money. And if somebody said to me, Hayden, the government's going to give everybody a check for $100,000, you don't need to do the career any longer, I think I'd rather do something like this than do the university accounts. I want that bit edited.
I was sort of building on that. What if you feel this sort of, you have this almost this like imperative that you've kind of placed upon yourself to get to a certain point, you know, to be able to do something, even if you don't really know what that is at this point. So like if you place upon yourself this kind of responsibility almost that you think you'll have to sort of bear in the future, and then regarding like your current trajectory, you feel that it's part of that process of getting there, even though no one really told you to do it, but you feel something is telling you that, you know, you'll get to that point where you'll need what you're doing at the moment, sort of thing, like your current trajectory instead of, you know, following, I suppose, your hobby or whatever you describe.
Look, your life has to be coherent. It has to make a sort of sense. Thinkers have said for about a century now, in some ways, a human life is like a novel. It's going to contain a number of chapters, it's going to contain various characters, it's got plot, it's got development, it's got shape. Your life can't be incoherent. You can't suddenly start saying, okay, I'm off to China tomorrow, I'm going to sell everything I've got, I'm going to sit on top of a pillar, and I'm going to... It's not that morally you may not do that, but psychologically I think you find that very difficult because your life suddenly would just go like that. Also, those who love you would find it very difficult because they don't want to go like that. They know you and they want to stay fairly stably with you as you develop. So there's reason for your life to have shape. However, as we said at one point last week, there is such a thing as conversion moments. I said for those who were here last week, I don't believe only in religious conversions. I believe in moral conversions and social conversions and emotional conversions. Sometimes you have in life a conversion type experience. I think that was the sort of thing you meant when you just said, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to live the dream. Passion is going to take me to do this thing. Now the first question there is always moral obligation. Am I able to fulfill all my obligations? If so, I think the coherent narrative of your life can carry a conversion. You know, anybody like Jane Austen? The novels and the films. I mean, those are the most beautifully structured of all novels, at least in the English language. They're a picture of rational development, coherence. But at some point in each one of those novels, the heroine will stop in her tracks and she'll suddenly see the man for the first time. Jane Austen's conversions are always erotic, romantic conversion, right? Once that happens, the novel turns around that moment of insight and change, and everything is different from that moment. But Austen works it beautifully through the structure and convention of the novel, so you do still feel you're reading the same novel. I think it's a bit like that with your life. You can change in a way that makes it the same novel. But I know where you're coming from too, because where you're standing just now, you've learned a lot of stuff, and you probably have a pretty good sense, I'm going to eat some of this stuff. I cannot have a complete break. Well, the good news is there's no reason why you should have a complete break. You can be as boring as I am and just go along that arc like that, and it's actually not that bad.
I've got a question.
Good.
Going back to sort of the emptiness and loneliness, being alone, how do you know where the line is between, obviously we all need time for ourselves and to work out who we are, and we also need time with our friends, but how do you work out the balance between being with your friends, how much time you need by yourself, and whether that turns into something where it's I'm lonely? How do you work out how much time you need between each of them?
Yeah, I think when loneliness actually begins, you usually know about it, because, I mean, personally, and I don't mind saying this in front of you all, it's that it's a deeply unsettling and unpleasant experience to feel lonely, and it creeps up on you. You don't know the moment it begins, but suddenly you're aware, I'm not. You know, it's Saturday afternoon and I should be with someone, I should be doing something, this isn't good. And once you note that sensation, it sort of gets bigger and bigger, it unsettles you and you know about it. So the first thing to say is you probably know, I mean not you, but one probably knows when that's starting, and as you see it start to grow, that's the moment when you pick up the phone or you get out of the house or you ask if someone's free, or if there's really nobody around you can or you want to be with, you go to activity. I don't know if you know that, folks, but if you do feel a bit trapped inside yourself and there isn't a mate around to make the connection with today, the next best thing is to go for a run, bake a cake, paint the ceiling in the bathroom, just any sort of activity, because when a human being is in activity, things begin to get better. It's one of the ways of beating loneliness, emptiness, and very mild depression also responds to that. So that would be the first thing to say. But let's say you're not actually starting to feel lonely. You're just wondering, do I have enough time with others, and do I have enough time with just by myself? And you sort of test yourself a bit again using the technology which we all have in our pockets, except me because I've left it up the road. How are you if no text message comes today? How are you if no call comes tomorrow? How are you if email goes down or you look at the inbox and it's completely empty? Because I think we should be okay in that situation. I don't think we should start to feel anxious in that situation. And if you do, that's probably something to ponder about. Why is this happening? And what does it reveal? I think between that key age of around 14 and call it 10 years, 14 to 24, I think sociability and social life, and by that I mean real social life, not social media, but real social life, I think it's the key thing for most of us in the teenage and the early 20 period. And I think we should all, as I did then, spend a lot of time with your friends. But they're not going to be there all the time. And you need time in those crucial years to discover who you are, so that special one Cassie is looking for will be able to see a whole and happy person when he comes along. So a bit of time on your own is good. But practically, I think you'll know when you have to go off to other people, because loneliness will begin and you won't like it, and neither should you. One last question, if we have one.
I was going to make a kind of comment. And so it was in regards to that emptiness over there, but and some emptiness of friends over here loneliness. But it was what we choose to fill ourselves with. Our emptiness, like the emptiness, that kind of darker emptiness, a lot of the time it's because we've filled ourselves to the brim with things that are just not agreeing with us, with who we are. And it's our fear of who we are that challenges us, because we're like, we want to look like this person, we want to be this person, and we want to have this and have all these things, but for some reason I'm unsettled in my spirit, and what I'm feeling myself isn't fulfilling me, isn't like, it's not bringing me life, it's not bringing me to life, it's actually killing my soul. And so in that silence of contemplating, in that silence of figuring out who you are, your identity, your mind, and being okay with that, being okay with the seasons that you're in, being okay with feeling anxious, being okay with not having everything together. And so just kind of that adventure, that time of just discovering who you are, and it's okay if you don't get things right, it's okay if you make mistakes, it's okay if you're clumsy, but just know that that time will pass and things will be added onto you, and you'll let things go, and that's okay. And you'll add things to your life, and that's okay. I don't know, being okay with the emptiness in your life, the fullness in your life, the joys, all those things, it's all kind of adds value to you and adds character and all that stuff.
Good, Evie, great comment. I agree with all of that. The only thing worse than the glass, which is made to be filled with water or wine, being completely empty, is if it were full of poison. And I think, I don't know if the words capture what you were saying so beautifully there, but if we become full of poison of one sort or another, that is a sort of emptiness. We're filled up, but we're filled up with that which cannot fulfill us. And what you have to do if you're filled with poison is obviously to spit it out. And once you spit it out, you are then empty. And that is just a bit like after you're ill, after you're sick. That's a healthy emptiness, because the body is evacuated so that once more it can be filled with good and rich things. That was a good insight. Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, Cassie. Did that help a few of the concerns, questions?
Yeah, I'd like to think through.
Yeah, think through this one. Great. Well, if you can write another letter next week, that'd be great. Not to sort of reveal maybe some of those things you might be saying, but maybe some of the issues you might be looking at next week might be looking at actually if we make some of these changes, some of the difficulties that might actually involve, and trying to get back on the boat when we fall off it in some way. So in those things, then the bigger, larger sort of narrative question about where our life's going, and maybe the question of God or the place of God in our life. So all this stuff is things that hopefully you might be able to pen a few other things for the next couple of weeks. So thank you for coming along. We're going to do it again same time next Wednesday. So it goes for 4 weeks, the second of 4 weeks, and a couple months left. I will also have the series up hopefully on YouTube soon, with hopefully not too many blanked out faces. And now, anyway, you guys are welcome and very warmly encouraged to stay back here. Zigi's is a great place for some great Australian and Israeli-inspired food. And his bottles and his kitchen, unlike sometimes some of us, is not empty or alone, but is filled with great wine and wonderful food. So fill yourself up with all of that and enjoy, and we'll see you here again next week at 6:30. Thanks everyone.